Hey everybody, Parker J, and welcome to another episode of Right Stuff International, where we showcase Christian authors worldwide. Today we have returned back to Taiwan as I talk with my guest co-host and contributor today, Christine Dillon. She was a recommend from Anna Lima Douglas. And let me thank Annie so much for inviting her onto the show. I've had a great time reading two of four of her books in the Grace series. And we're going to be talking about the first book. We're going to hint at the second book. And guess what? You got to get the third and fourth book in this series. Series has been heralded as one of a wonderful tale, a wonderful story. And I definitely agree with all the reviews that have been going on about this series. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest co-host and contributor today, Christine Dillon. Christine, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Woke up to the sound of a jackhammer outside and worried that we wouldn't be able to do this interview at all. I'm
Mm-hmm.
in Taiwan, so I'm 12 hours difference to Parker.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's a lovely hot morning here.
Oh, it's a warm evening here too. It is I think it's Friday right now for you and it's Thursday for me. So it's always fun to see you arrive to tomorrow. So glad you arrived to tomorrow. It didn't stop it didn't stop today. But I'm really excited to talk to you, Christine. I already told you before we started airing that I loved your book and I can't wait to delve deep down into it. But before I do that, I have to get to know more about you. So go ahead and tell us who you are in your own words.
I've had an unusual background. I'm a missionary kid. My parents worked in Taiwan, and I did my schooling in Malaysia and the Philippines. So a British boarding school and then an American boarding school. Um, but I'm Australian. And so when I was 17, I returned to Australia, finished my schooling, went to university where I studied what you call physical therapy, we call physiotherapy, and worked for a couple of years in the hospital and the private system, and then always knew I wanted to be a missionary. So I went to what you call seminary, Bible college, for a couple of years, and then returned overseas in 1999, and I've been working as a church planter in southern Taiwan, which basically means I go out and tell people that have not the slightest interest in Jesus. I tell them Bible stories and gather groups of Christians and not like that.
What I find fascinating is that you said you go to places where people have not even heard about Jesus and possibly aren't even interested in him. It's funny you mentioned that because we had in our church a couple of weeks ago, we had a missionary who was coming to give, to give report and everything like that. He said, I want to go where people have never heard of Jesus. He said, I want to work with fresh ground. And what an opportunity is to share the gospel with those who don't know him. We often think we have to stay in our comfort zone and do that, but God usually works best when we're outside of our comfort zone. That's still something I'm getting used to dealing with because sometimes you do get out of your comfort zone and it's a very scary place to be. You said something interesting that you were a missionary kid. And this is the second time it's come up recently. I've been kind of nervous about joining a mission, like a 2-week mission with our church or something like that. So go ahead, tell us what benefits do people such as me who haven't gone on a mission trip, even such a short-term mission, what benefits do we gather from doing that? Or what is it that we need to know about missionaries in general?
Well, maybe what you need to know about us is that we're just ordinary people
Hmm.
who are willing to go cross culturally. It's scary, but it's a great place to be because when we're comfortable, we can manage our lives quite well without Jesus, and then we only use him sort of for the margins and the scary bits. But as a missionary, every day you're having to trust him because there are always things you don't understand. I speak fluent Mandarin and Taiwanese, and I still have so much I don't understand that I'm praying all the time. So it forces you to trust Jesus more and pushes you to do it. And so I think even short term, the biggest benefits to short term are not to what you do overseas. You're very limited in what you can do. but it will change you, and it will make you think about the world in a different way and see people differently.
Wow. Wow. I like the fact you said, here, and it is like that. It's hard for us to talk about Jesus and we're not under persecution like some people are. We're not under threat of death, like some people are. And you said, you have to rely on him every day. And I will admit I am jealous that you speak Taiwanese and Mandarin so well
Yeah.
because
Well,
one of my
Mandarin's a very useful language.
Oh yeah. What I would love to speak every language in the world because I love to talk. I would love to speak every language, like everyone in the world. Like imagine how many conversations you can have with people. But yeah, it's just amazing some of the things that you said. So I'm really excited to have you with us here. And I want to dig down to your book because I want to know what was that moment when you said, I have to write the Grace series. Tell us about the genesis of this idea.
Ah, it's a very strange genesis because I hear lots of authors say, "Oh, I would love to write. I've always wanted to write," but that's not me. I actually started by writing non-fiction, and that just came straight out of my work. So I wrote a book on one-to-one discipleship, a book on telling Bible stories, evangelism through telling Bible stories. But I was having a prayer day, and I think it was about 2007, and I was praying about ministry, and suddenly it was like a download happened, and I got two titles for books, novels, and the basic idea. And I sort of looked up and I said, Lord, no way, I can't do this. I haven't got the ability to write fiction. It's way too hard, and I don't want to do it. And then I thought, oh, you're not allowed to say no to God. So I said, okay, if that really was you, you will have to force me to do it, and you'll have to give me the ability to do it. And I just put it aside. I wrote down the ideas and I put it aside. And then slowly over the next 6 years, the internal pressure got stronger and stronger. Until one day I was reading a Francine Rivers book, The Sons of Encouragement.
Mhm.
And I thought, that's how I practice writing a novel. I write a biblical fiction novel because I'm a Bible storyteller, and I practice dialogue and story, but you can't change the story in biblical fiction. It's got a story. So I thought that that would make it easy. So I wrote two practice novels, and then I started on the real thing.
Interesting that you had said that that pressure built up. Remind me of Jeremiah when he was like, it was like fire shut up in my
Mm-hmm.
bones. Like I can't keep this to myself. I have to tell somebody. And I like that example. It reminds me of an old song when I was growing up, one of the old, old 80s gospel, and they had the it was just like, and it goes anyway, let me stop. But but that's he would say it was like fire shut up in my bones. And I remember that song, you have to say something because God's not going to
It
let you
becomes
sit
an
down.
obedience issue. It
Yes,
became an
yes.
obedience issue. You
Hmm.
will do this or you will be disobeying me. And so,
Yeah,
that's the point where you just sort of, okay,
yeah, yeah. And
gotta
I
do it.
like the fact you mentioned that it is about obedience because obedience is better than sacrifice. It's better than that because when you're obedient, you don't have to sacrifice. And some of the simplest things that we are disobedient on are actually quite life changing. If let's say you don't covet something, what we say is neighbor's wife and stuff, but let's say anything. You don't have to be jealous. I'm not saying you don't get jealous tendencies. Of course, I would love to have, whatever, but I'm not going to sit here and let it eat at me. You know what I'm saying? Or, I'm using commandments because a lot of people are familiar with the commandments, even though most of us don't follow them, but we're very familiar with the commandments in the Western world. I'm saying, like you say, don't lie. And so being obedient to that saves from a lot of stress. We don't have to remember our stories, So we like to tell stories. We have to remember all the lies that we told. Something very simple that's easy to do, but we have to sacrifice something else when we don't be obedient. It's something very simple, but obedience is so hard to do. So I like the fact that you said it's an obedience issue, not just it's got to get it out of me. It's not that, it's being obedient. So here you have this story and you're working on, you did two practice novels and you're working on it. And so one thing about this story is that we will call it Christian fiction, but it actually falls into the category, in my opinion, of women's fiction because women's fiction differs greatly from what I write. Like I definitely write sweet, inspirational romances, and I write romances, contemporary historical. Um, And there's nothing wrong with that. I try to keep it, fine. But for some, women's fiction can be very empowering. So tell us a little bit about these books. We're not going to go into them just yet, but tell us about, women's fiction and what you think it means for women or men who read these books.
Yeah, women's fiction is a genre that's really misunderstood. So it's not just for women. Actually, I have a lot of male readers. I even have 12-year-old boys that read my books, which surprises me.
Oh,
Women's
wow.
fiction is issues-based fiction. So in a Christian novel, women's fiction is about the spiritual and emotional journey that the character goes through. So these are the kind, Francine Rivers wrote quite a few of this kind of category. They're usually contemporary. They have an issue like a terrible thing happens and learning to forgive, or learning to jealousy issues, or learning to love your spouse, or issues with family, all of these kind of issues. And there should be a change, a transformation of the character through the story. My fifth one that I'm writing now in the series is going to have a male main character. I don't know what to call it because there's no such thing as men's fiction being the equivalent. So it's still in the sense that it's following a journey. So I have no idea what I'm going to call the fifth one, what genre.
Well, I think there is men's fiction to an extent, and it's funny that you say that because I've been having a germ of an idea of writing like men's fiction, not men's fiction, but something in that term, in that category where I try to understand things from a man's point of view. And in romance, a lot of men they laugh about this. They said these men all sound like women, right? In romances, these men aren't real. These men have issues.
I think Chris Fabry writes probably the equivalent.
Mhm.
His are often about men and the journey they go through.
Yeah, yeah. And so I totally feel you. So I can't wait to read that because the series is excellent. And for our viewers out there, we are talking Christine Dillon. She is the author of the Grace series. The first book we're going to be talking about today is Grace in Strange Disguise. And then we're just going to breeze through the second book. We're not going to really talk about the second book because it's a continuation from the first, but it's a really cohesive story that I know you're going to enjoy. I certainly did. In the series, it's about, you said 5 books now. I'm so excited to know that. So I'll be waiting to get my
There
copy
should
when
be
I get a
six.
chance to.
There should be
Huh?
six eventually, but I usually can only write one a year because I've got a full-time job as a missionary.
Oh, for sure. Well, obviously, yeah, but I'm excited for it. Can't wait till it comes out. So, real quickly, let's go ahead and delve into Grace in Strange Disguise. I'm going to go ahead and bring that up on the screen here, and she's going to put it there too. I'm going to hide myself real quickly. So, there she is right there. It's a gorgeous book. I like the paperback, and I'm going to make this full blown here. So that is Grace in Strange Disguise. It is book 1 of the Grace series. And I can tell you right now, everyone, this book, it will change your viewpoint about what grace is, what it means, what it does. It's going to just give you so many things to think about. The book is absolutely phenomenal. And I was telling Christine, it really had a personal effect on me, and I'm glad to talk about it and share it with the viewers right now. So, without giving us any spoilers, tell us what Grace in Strange Disguise is about.
Well, originally this was a one-off book,
Hmm.
and one of the reasons I wanted to write it was that when I am discipling people, so often something goes wrong in their life and they begin asking why and doubting that God's good to them.
Hmm.
And so I wanted to tackle this misunderstanding that we have that God is some sort of divine wish granter, and his prime thing is to just make life easy for us, because I don't think that's what God's about at all. And I thought, let's tackle it in a story rather than in a non-fiction book. And so it's about a girl, Esther, who, since I was a physiotherapist, she's a physiotherapist, raised in a family. Her father's a preacher, and he's always said, if you believe in Jesus, you'll be blessed. And until the age of 28, she has no reason to doubt it. She's always had, she's smart, she's done well at school, she's got a lovely boyfriend that everyone, envies her. Everything seems to be fine, and then she gets cancer. I can spoil up to that point. And she suddenly has to think, well, where's the blessing in this? And of course, her father says, do this, do that, fast and pray, anoint you with oil, it'll all be okay. And so the story is about a clash of worldviews. What happens when God doesn't do what you think he ought to do? So that's the story. And the impact that it has not only on the main character, Esther, and her family, but also on people around her and her view of life.
And it's a fascinating tale of this woman's progress into believing about a Jesus that didn't exist, to knowing that the Jesus that does exist is so much better than the one she thought existed. And of course, most of my viewers who follow me know of my own personal thing, my twin sister who had cancer twice now, and how we went through that journey. And so this book really spoke to me on so many levels. I got really emotional at some points because it just brought out all those questions that we have, particularly the question of why me. And of course, we have to talk about Job for a second, Christine, when we talk about why me, because Job, I mean, he did stuff right. He didn't have word of faith back in the day. Okay, he didn't think that God was a genie, but he figured I'm gonna keep doing this. He's very legalistic, but I actually think that he also believed, like he believed from his heart. It wasn't
He's a
just
genuine
legalism.
believer.
Yeah, he was genuine believer, kind of like the Roman centurion that I'm thinking of right now. It's escaping my head right now, but think about him too. And he genuinely believed, and then all of a sudden stuff started happening. And you gotta give Job a little credit. He had a lot happen. A lot happened, And so he kind of went, why me? Why is that such a we have to be careful when we mention why me, when we start to go through difficulties. Tell us why we need to be careful when we say things like that.
Well, why me is sort of saying to God that because we're a Christian, even if we live in this painful world, that we're supposed to have assumes that we've got a protective bubble around us.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, God is here and he cares about our maturity and our bringing him glory more than anything else. And Chinese has a phrase which says, true gold does not fear the fire.
Wow. Oh, I like that.
Yeah, true gold does not fear the fire. And God is about making 24 karat gold. And unfortunately, the only way that you can get 24 karat gold is to go through fire. And so we have to change our whole thinking and on this whole issue of suffering and difficulty, and get to the point that Paul seems to have gotten to, which is, thank you for my weaknesses, rejoice always, even in hard times. And that's a long journey for most people. So I really wanted to tackle that in this book. And you see people that do not get it at all, and they turn from God, and people that do get it. And you see what happens to Esther. And, before, her life didn't much mean anything, but as she begins to learn who God truly is, it begins to make an impact on others and really make a difference in the world for eternity. And I really want to write fiction that I call it eternity transforming or life transforming fiction that impacts eternity.
And definitely does. Like I said, I had a very visceral reaction to a lot of things that Esther was going through, particularly because she was so young. She's 28, and at 28, you think your whole life is ahead of you. And then you get hit with wham, 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 wham. And then, oh my gosh, here's a Mack truck coming at you. And so she got hit with a lot of things. But it was fascinating because the book is called Grace in Strange Disguise. And I was a little curious as to why you titled it Grace in Strange Disguise. But I said, keep reading. You'll probably find out why. And then you do. So let's go ahead and talk about grace real quick, because grace is something that's extremely misunderstood. And it's a point that you take careful time to point out in this series about what grace is. So tell us what grace is, and even if you have to give us an example of it.
I mean, the easiest thing is to say it's undeserved favor. because we think that God should favor us. For whatever reason, we think he should favor us. And so actually the question is not why me? Why has this happened to me? The question actually should always be the opposite. Why not me?
Yeah.
Because actually we live in a sinful, painful world. We've rejected God right from the beginning. And even if we've become a Christian, we still often go our own way. And so we really should expect that pain is pretty normal. But there's something in us that just reacts against it and thinks that God's supposed to be there helping us. So grace, and I called it grace in strange disguise because so many of God's graces are strangely disguised. They come to us through pain. They come to us through difficulty. I mean, you look at the story of Joseph. Joseph gets sold into slavery. He gets stuck in prison. Everything is not his fault, really. I mean, he did irritate his brothers, but not to the extent of getting sold into slavery. And yet, in the end of his life, he says God meant it for good, and he's able to look back and to see that God had a bigger plan. And so he really had grace. Prison was grace in strange disguise. Going to Egypt was grace in strange disguise. And if you look at the characters in the Bible, so much of what God does isn't how we would do it. But in the end, you can see that it's God's grace to us. God's undeserved favor, love and mercy to make us more like Jesus in character.
Amen. Amen. I feel like I'm at I think you need like a pulpit, and then I can give you a mic.
I am so
And then
offended. So yes.
I love it. I'm loving it because it's like when you read the book, to our viewers out there, when you read the book, it's going to make you think, and it's going to give you emotional connection with the characters. One thing writers always struggle with is, character development, character development. But it's not just character development. Like you said, this is eternity transformation fiction. This is where I want to think about what's going to happen if this ever happened to me, And I again, I'm not trying to make it like it's focus on me, but I remember when I was faced with that with my twin sister. I remember going, I knew I would see her again. It wasn't that, but it was like, Laura, I still want her with me. Like I can't right now. And I remember saying, Laura, I don't want to read the story. I don't want to hear it. I don't, but the Lord was extremely gracious and he healed her. Another thing that you mentioned, and this is in the second book, I'm not going to mention too much about it because I really want our viewers to read it. But in the second book, you did something interesting in the foreword. There's a second book right there. And by the way, I have to tell you, your covers are gorgeous. These covers are
my
just...
cover designer is Joy Lancashire. I actually went to primary school with her, but she is an Australian designer. Beautiful covers. And
gorgeous.
All my non-fiction and fiction now, she's designing all those covers. Mm-hmm. She once did a Time magazine cover, so for an Australian to get a Time magazine cover was pretty amazing. Yeah, she's a great designer.
Oh, that's awesome. I have to connect with our people over here in the US of A because, I always have authors looking for designers, so I'll be glad to connect her. But yeah, gosh, the covers are gorgeous. I'm going to show it here on the screen here. That's Grace in Disguise. I mean, Grace in the Shadows. And this one kind of is a continuation. Oh yeah, it's kind of a continuation of the story here. So you do have to read books 1 and 2. You do have to read Grace in Strange Disguise and Grace in the Shadows because it's a continuation of it. And when you look at them side by side, I'm going to see if I can do that real quickly. If you look at them side by side, I can't do it. It won't let me do it. Let me see if I can go here. They're just gorgeous, and it just evokes so many images when you look at them. So there they go right there. Lovely, lovely covers there. So tell her she did a great job. She did a great job there. But Grace in Strange Disguise and Grace in the Shadows. In the beginning, I got sidetracked. Sorry about that. In the beginning, you said, you've been told that people shouldn't write about miracles. And when I read that in the acknowledgement section, I said, are you kidding me? Who said you shouldn't do that? So you got to... we serve a God who our very existence is a miracle, that he took nothing and created something. So that's a miracle in and of itself. So why would we not write about that?
Yeah, the reason that authors are told not to use miracles is it's regarded as a easy way to get out of a writing corner. You've written yourself into a corner, like painting yourself into a corner. And then, okay, let's solve this by having a miracle. So I thought, well, that's crazy not to have miracles when you've got a miracle working God. So what I did is I made the decision that every miracle in my stories has to be based on a real story. So at the end of the book, I explain that, and every miracle is related to something I've either heard from someone I know, or it really is someone I know. And I think that's quite fun. Actually, most of the miracles in the story I toned down from the original miracle because people wouldn't believe it. It's too miraculous, you know. Yeah.
You know what? I have to say, we, like you said, we serve a miracle working God. We serve a God who can do amazing things. Just because he doesn't do it for us doesn't mean that he can't. And some people, I think, like you said, they want the genie in the bottle kind of God. They want the genie, was it, I gotta age myself now. From the land beyond, beyond, from the world past hope and fear, I bid you, genie, now appear, from Sinbad in the seventh seat and the seventh voyage of Sinbad. Remember that. I know, I just totally aged myself. But that's the kind of God we want. And that was the kind of God that she thought existed. But it's very interesting because that kind of God did not satisfy the deeper longings of her heart, because getting everything you want tends to make you a spoiled brat. It tends to go, well, I deserve it. There's one point in there where this one lady challenges her as she deals with this diagnosis. This one woman challenges her. She was like, how dare you talk to me? I'm so and so. And that was the God that she served. Yeah, she was like, who? I'm like, please shut up. I remember thinking, like, please shut up, like you. But if the woman had not challenged her, her journey would not have taken the turn that it did. And she had a rough journey. Esther in the story has a very rough journey, especially in Grace is Strange Disguise. It's a rough journey because she's dealing with a lot. And I like the fact that it takes place in 1994. I love that because you kind of have that authentic a feel to it, because it's not a lot of technology. People are doing all sorts of weird things. So she's in a place technologically where there's no excuse. Here's the thing, though, with her father. Her father's an interesting character because here he is, well-known preacher. God has supposedly got it together, but he cannot hear the cry of his own daughter. Do you think that's something that a lot of people in church deal with? Not necessarily their fathers or their moms, but just that there are Christians in their church who cannot hear the cry of other Christians.
Well, I think her father is obsessed with work and reputation, and because he's a professional pastor, I mean, you got to decide in books 1 and 2, is he even a believer? Well, I'll leave that to you. But book 3 is his story, because he's a horrible man. And I know my own father, who is not a horrible man. He was really worried that people would think I based the story on him. And I said, Dad, no, I'm not going around writing stories about people that are horrible and basing it on real people. There might be elements of it based on people, but they're not. I'm not writing people's stories. That's horrible. So it's not my father. But it's what he's obsessed with. Mm-hmm. And her whole journey is challenging everything he believes, and he's not ready to face that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the conflict just gets more and more, because to even be around her is challenging to his thinking, challenging to his whole life, and everything he's based his life on. So he's a horrible character, and some people found him almost so unbearable that they couldn't read on. And I said, keep reading, Mm-hmm. We serve a big God. Is there hope for a man like that? And book 3, of course.
Well, I honestly believe there is no heart too dark that God's love can't reach. And so he can reach the lowest of sinners. Another thing that you talk about is this thing about faith and healing. And that's something in the Christian church that I really think needs to be discussed. And we're going to discuss it here, because there are a lot of people who feel as if being healthy, being wealthy, having a certain status means that you are blessed by God. And this teaching bothers me on so many levels. But you did an effective way of showing how that teaching and believing that did not give Esther what she needed. Because when she was diagnosed with cancer and they did all these things, she did not get the answers that she sought. And it let her know that what that teaching does is put us on a works based sort of relationship with God. Like if I do this, then God will do this.
Yeah,
And
sort of a
that's not the case.
bargaining kind
Hmm.
of thing. Yeah,
Like you're
nothing about
bargaining.
relationship. Yeah, and there are lots of characters. We get some little hints of other characters. There's a minor character that she meets. I can't even remember if the lady has a name. I'm sure she does have a name, but I can't remember it. And she's someone that's been hurt by the teaching and as a result has rejected God entirely. And when you preach a false gospel, believe in Jesus and everything will be wonderful, when things go wrong, the logical thing is to say, well, Jesus doesn't exist and he doesn't love me, and to reject him altogether. And it's a terrible thing to do to people. Much, much better to help us see that Jesus promised that the road would be narrow and steep and to be making the right choice, but it will be worth it the whole way. So that's really what you want to communicate through the story.
Yes, and you do that so well. And we're talking a lot about what the books talk about, but I am encouraging our viewers out there to read this book, especially the first two, because they're like one complete story. It reads so quickly and so many things happen. And this journey is a journey that any of us could take. I could take this journey. You could take this journey. It's a journey anyone can take, which makes it so relatable. And as she begins to understand certain things, it causes to have effect on her relationships. And following Jesus is not easy. Especially right now in our current climate right now here in the States. I don't know if you probably have different
Yeah.
types of things happening
Yes.
in Taiwan, but you got to be aware of what's going on here in the States. And right now, particularly in the US, there's a lot of racial tensions going on right now. And with those racial tensions, people are actually subverting the Christian message in order to make people feel better. And I've seen some horrible things online, and it's actually quite frightening because while we're all fighting for equality, which is, great job. We definitely should. We're trying to subvert the Christian message. And Satan loves nothing more than to subvert the gospel of God. He loves nothing more than to attack Christians when we're getting all confused and they're mixing and they're doing this weird thing. They're mixing, faith with culture and just weird things that's going on right now. So we have to be prayerful particularly in the U.S., have to be prayerful for that. But even in the midst of that, the God that we serve says, I have overcome the world. And that's a promise we can take with us. And that's something that Esther learns throughout here. He said, in this life, you will have trial and tribulation. But he said, be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. And that's very important because he didn't say in this life, you're going to be blessed. You will be blessed, but not the way you think. That's why it's called grace is strange disguise.
What blessing is.
Yes,
Actually,
yes.
I don't know if you noticed in the books, but one of the things I was very keen to have, they're set in Australia, and I was very keen to have the different migrants that we have in Australia that make part of Australia. So we have a main secondary character is from mainland China. We have Italian, Swiss sort of couple. We've got, in the different books, we've got people from different backgrounds, South African and whatever and whatever. So that's very, very deliberate. And in book 2 and book 4, we have a wonderful Down syndrome character.
Yes.
Who, I wanted to challenge some of our prejudices, including my own.
And we have many. We have many. I'll be honest with you. We have so many. We really do. And I actually like that feel of it because I've been watching a lot of Australian TV lately. It's been reality TV, but it's very diverse. And one thing about Australians, I gotta say, they're very blunt speaking people. They kind of just tell it. And you kind of in America, we kind of, we want to be, I think that was pretty dumb of you. They kind of just say it like, oh, wow, I'm stuffed. They say stuff like that. And I'm like, wow, but you can appreciate that bluntness. Sometimes you need a direct approach. And as I was reading about this, you were talking about how Australians view the Bible. They have a lot of not all Australians, obviously, but, antagonism and how you're reaching people. And I could tell you were doing it in a very practical way because the same problems that Australia has, the U.S. has, and England has, and all over the world, people have these barriers barriers to Christ. And I think you did an effective job, particularly in the first two books, hitting those barriers through our story with Esther.
Well, one of my backgrounds is if you were to say what's your spiritual gift, it's probably people would say it was evangelism. So I've seen a lot of Christian fiction where they have evangelism happening, but they obviously haven't checked with an evangelist because it's not very good. And so I wanted to model the kind of gospel conversations that you can have that are real. So all my gospel conversations are real things that I've said, or I wanted them to be very real.
I like that too, because this is someone who, and people, I've said this before, I do have a problem with conflict and confrontation because I like being, people pleaser, like Esther, people pleaser, well, I don't want to be, I don't think I'm a suck up, but you like to make people happy, be happy with you. One thing the Lord is, and I don't think there's nothing wrong with that to an extent, but if you follow the master first, please him first, we don't have to worry about pleasing everybody else because then we get tired. We get very tired of trying to please everybody because guess what? You can't please everybody, And so I really like that aspect of it because it's for people like me, because she becomes, through this journey, she starts to become bolder. But then when she starts to hit resistance, you have to wonder, is she going to continue to stay bold? And some of the conversations you had in there from a practical standpoint of evangelism, like there's one character, you have no idea if anything that she said actually hit his heart. You're hoping that it does. And you're like, I hope what she says hit his heart. There's another character in there where they were talking about something and you hear someone sniffling. You never know who that person is. Like you have no idea who this person is behind this screen because the Asian lady is telling the story. And you're like, who is that sniffling behind the curtain? That's what I was thinking. Like, who is that? And I guess what? So far, you don't find out in books 1 or 2. So far, I haven't gotten to.
But quite often, when we share the gospel with somebody, there could be an eavesdropper, and that's the eavesdropper.
Yeah.
And that's the reality, is that when we share on a bus or a train or somewhere more public, God will have people listening in, and you just got to be aware that there are people out there that you might think you're talking to this person, but God might actually, the plan might be for the other person who's eavesdropping.
Yes, and you do all of that in this story. Like I said, it's a wonderful story. As we get close to the end of our discussion today, it's a wonderful book, and I really enjoyed it. And the second book is just as powerful as the first, and it just really picks up where the first book left off. And there are so many blows that Esther receives, but you kind of wonder, am I capable of handling that much pain? It's hard enough for me. I stub my toe and I'm crying out for the Lord. I'm saying, ow, Lord, I hurt myself. Where she has to deal with a lot of issues, particularly with health. And I particularly love how you show the emptiness of that belief, like health and wealth equals your spiritual status. And that's hardly the case. I know a young lady right now, she texted me last week and I was praying real hard for her. She said, I don't know if I'm going to make it because she's been sick for a really, really, really long time, like years. We're talking years. She's chronically ill. And she said, can you please pray for me? And I put her on the list at the church, obviously, and keep praying for her, and she said, but what she told me though, Christine, she said, Jesus will heal me, whether it's on this side or when I see his face. That's exactly what she said. And of course I'm bawling. And I said, oh, I hope one day I can have that type of faith. I would love to be there.
Would you loan her the books? They sound like they would be just the right encouragement. Because I do want to say they are not heavy books in the sense of doom and gloom the whole way. No, there's hope all the way through them. So
thank you for bringing that up. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, I'm like, they're heavy. Like, oh wow, I want to read that, Parker. Gee, I've read books like that where they get really, really heavy. It's like, I'm done with this.
It shouldn't depress you.
Like, there's got to be hope somewhere in here. Please, hope, show your face. But Christine, thank you so much for being with me on this edition of Right Stuff International. In a few moments we have left, what would you like to say to our viewers out there? Please feel free to lead and talk as the Lord guides you.
Oh, that's a hard one. The kind of Christian really has made a difference to me are stories that I think you can't forget and will change you and challenge you and make you think. And I think of ones like Randy Alcorn's Safely Home. If you can read that without having it change your life, then you really are very hard. Or some of the Francine Rivers contemporaries. So that's what I'm aiming to write, because I don't want to just write books. I haven't got time to just write fun. I want to write books that make a difference and make an impact for the world and make people love Jesus more and run after him more and be willing to serve him more. So it's been a wonderful opportunity to talk. This is my first ever talking about my novels. I've done quite a few interviews for nonfiction, but the first time about my novels. So thank you very much.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I know you wanted to talk about your fiction, but I didn't know it was that. And, I do that all day long. I do it every week, and I love talking about fiction. I'll be honest with you, Christine. I wish I could write nonfiction. I wish I can do it, but I feel like that's a lot of work, because,
I find for me,
uh-huh.
nonfiction is a lot easier because it's coming
Yeah,
straight out of my life.
yeah.
Fiction requires a great deal of creativity and a lot of planning.
Yeah, and see, that's where I live at in that imagination. You say,
Yeah.
tell us about your life, Parker. Boring. Okay, so there we go. But Christine, thank you so much for being with us on the show for this edition of The Right Stuff. Cannot wait to have you back because we definitely want to talk about your nonfiction too. Would love to talk to you about that. But I think I want to do that on a audio podcast. So we'll talk about that offline. But, really glad that you were here with me today to share your work, your books. Again, I'm just going to show everyone the covers of these books. They are absolutely phenomenal. We have Grace in Strange Disguise, and we also have Grace in the Shadows. They're down there below. Go ahead and take a look at those. Make sure you go ahead and pick up your copy of those. And there they are. She has those with her. I'm going to actually let I'm gonna make that big for you. Keep them up so I can show our viewers out there how gorgeous those covers are. There they go, and they're absolutely gorgeous. So make sure you pick up that. And the other two are Grace in Deep Waters and Grace in the Desert. That's books 3 and 4. Now, books 3. It's not a spoiler. It's not a spoiler, but it's about her dad. That's all I'm gonna say. Okay, that's all we know. It's about her dad. And so make sure you pick up those copies as well. Sorry about that. But thank you so much, Christine, for being with us. I really enjoyed talking to you and that you were all the way in Taiwan. It's 9:20 something here. It must be 9:20 something there too. But tomorrow, it's tomorrow for you and yesterday for you and tomorrow for me. So kind of cool to be talking like this. But thank you, Christine, for being with us today and can't wait to have you back on the show sometime soon.
Okay, thank you.
And we were talking to Christine Dillon. She is the author of the Grace series. Book 1 is called Grace in Strange Disguise. You can see another copy of it right there. Let me tell you, when you read this book, it's so heartfelt and genuine. You really go through a lot of emotions as you read the story. I know I did, particularly for those of you who have dealt with the prognosis and diagnosis of cancer. This book is going to hit you right in the chest. But one thing that Christine said, she said, it is full of hope. And that is a common thread throughout both of these books. The first one, which is called Grace in Strange Disguise, and the second one, which is called Grace in the Shadows. There's a copy of it right there. So make sure if you don't read the whole series, but you're going to read the whole series, I assure you. But if you want to read just these two books, you're going to love them. And I want to thank Christine again for being on the show with us today to talk about her books. Again, if you want to prayerfully consider supporting this ministry, we do showcase Christian authors worldwide and all around the world. Been doing it now for 7 years. As you know, we just started accepting donations 2 months ago. If you want to give to our ministry, feel free to do so. Go to patreon.com/right stuff. Become a Quill member for $3 a month. If you can't do that, that is no problem. I covet your prayers because prayers do something that money can't do, and prayers work better than money. So I covet your prayers. So continue to pray for this ministry. Thank you all for your support. You have a wonderful, blessed day, and God bless.